really excited to talk to y'all about post-traumatic growth and recovery. And I'll just kind of center a little bit kind of how I came to this place and a little bit of my story. I was not originally a substance use or post-traumatic growth or addictions researcher or whatever label you want to put on that. Early in my career, I started off really working in child welfare. And there was a point in my master's program where you have to take electives. And the elective that was available was in interventions with substance use disorders. And I said, well, I don't want to take that elective, right? I said, that's not what I'm going to do. So I went and worked in the child welfare system, which is roughly 70% families impacted by substance use, and very quickly learned that I could not care about one without caring about the other. Right? And so as I continued that journey, one of the things that also got centered in that practice is that I have many family members affected by substance use disorder. And so I became a very good ally. But I also got to witness the recovery process and became very interested, not so much in illness and pathology, but in what happens in this experience of recovery and kind of the transformation that people face. And so in working with a couple of doctoral students, we decided that we really wanted to explore these narratives. And so I'm going to talk to you about that. This is really about 5 narratives. This is tiny. Right? It's also very fun and exciting because this is the hope that all of us see, right? And the good stuff that we get to witness. And so I'm really just sharing with you other people's stories and experiences, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about how we can foster that experience and help people to have that transformation. So again, this research is looking specifically at those who participated in 12-step recovery programs, and it was looking for themes of post-traumatic growth within their narratives and their stories. So in terms of what the hope for today is to kind of just look at post-traumatic growth. What are the domains of that? Like, what am I talking about? What does that mean, right? Talk about what role that plays in fostering post-traumatic growth for those in recovery from substance use disorder, and then really talk about how we can use that information in order to support people in a journey that leads to growth. So we know that substance use disorders are associated with trauma in our literature. We also know that the concept of post-traumatic growth may apply to recovery. So this is kind of the orientation that we're starting from. We know that this can happen particularly in the domain of spiritual change, although you'll see in our narratives it was actually very strong across all of the domains of post-traumatic growth. And we know that we see this in the trauma narratives. It's consistent with the Post-Traumatic Growth Inventory, which is a tool that can kind of measure post-traumatic growth for folks. So what post-traumatic growth is, for those who want kind of a grounding in that, is it's a theory that explains how trauma makes people question their core beliefs. This idea that something happens to you that kind of shatters everything that you believed about the world and makes you look at things in a different way. And that really is a place where people can experience significant growth. It occurs when people who've experienced a trauma integrate their experience into their lives, and it leads them to developing a whole new belief system. So my assumption is that there's probably a lot of people in this room who have had a life experience that shattered everything that they knew about life and have built a newer belief system moving forward. So it's probably very, very many narratives in this room as well. The domains of post-traumatic growth are how you relate to other people, seeing new possibilities, personal strengths, spiritual and experiential change, and then a renewed appreciation of life. So the way that you measure post-traumatic growth is there's the Post-Traumatic Growth Inventory, and there's an expanded inventory, which is what we used with the participants here. And it really looks at how you perceive the benefits that you've accrued from experiencing and redefining your life following a trauma. It can really talk about how you've created meaning And it has been found to be, post-traumatic growth shows up across many traumas, things like rape, incest, natural disasters, bereavement, combat, those who have survived the Holocaust. There is this experience of post-traumatic growth. And so we just really want to look at this specifically in terms of recovery. This can occur because when you experience something traumatic, you start to search for meaning and want to make meaning of this experience. So the Post-Traumatic Growth Index has 21 items on it, and we'll talk about those and how they fit with different things. And then the Expanded has 25. It has high internal consistency and acceptable test-retest reliability. So for those of you not feeling too researchy, that means it's a good tool, right, that we chose to use. So one of those factors is relating to others. So this looks at things like positive change in relationships, your attitudes, your behaviors in a relationship. It can encompass things like making a decision to spend more time with friends and family, expressing to them how much you love and value them. It can also be evident in your decisions to move out of unhealthy relationships into healthy relationships. And so the Post-Traumatic Growth Inventory, some of the items that measure that is asking people things like, I more clearly see that I can count on people in times of trouble, or I have a greater sense of closeness with others. I'm more willing to express my emotions following the trauma. I put more effort into my relationships. I learned a great deal about how wonderful people are. I better accept needing others, which gets to the idea of vulnerability. So all of those questions, when asked of people, fall into this domain called how they relate to others, and the idea that that changes following this life-changing event. New possibility speaks to things like being able to look at different paths in life, taking on new adventures. It can be experienced through new interests, your activities, new habits, building a new career that wouldn't have been part of your life except by the triggering event, right? And so, I'm going to skip a little bit to like things that you may hear, but you do often find that through a recovery process that someone develops an interest, right, or a job, or wants to change career paths to something that feels meaningful to them in this time in their life. It may provide people with a sense that they're called to address some kind of circumstances that they've gone through in order to make their personal work lives service to others. And this measures items like, I develop new interest, I establish a new path for my life, I'm able to do better things with my life. New opportunities are available, which wouldn't have been otherwise. I'm more likely to try to change things which need changing. So those are all items that help to get at whether or not someone has experienced this domain of post-traumatic growth. Personal strength is another domain. And that is really looking at being stronger than someone imagined, having an increased sense of self-reliance, a strength and confidence, a perception of themselves as a survivor or a victor rather than being a victim, a sense that there's nothing that they cannot do. And so some of the items that get to this concept are having a greater feeling of self-reliance, knowing that they can better handle difficulties, being better able to accept the way things work out, and discovering that they're stronger than that they thought they were. Spiritual and experiential change is another domain, and this is looking at existential aspects of change in religion and spirituality. See? It's been 2 years, y'all. But I now have a kind and loving audience. Reflections on interconnection with others, harmony, thoughts about mortality, engagement with matters that are related to religious beliefs or spiritual matters, philosophical questions. And so the item asks things like, do you have a greater clarity about life's meaning? Are you better able to face questions about life and death? Do you feel more connected with all of existence? Do you have a greater sense of harmony with the world now? Do you have a better understanding of spiritual matters? And do you have a stronger religious faith? And then there's appreciation of life. So folks who have experienced post-traumatic growth following a traumatic event have a greater appreciation for all things that life has to offer. They don't take for granted things that they previously did. And they have a greater appreciation for the people in their lives. They see life as a gift, and they have a second chance that they want to take advantage of. And some of the items that fall here are things like I changed my priorities about what's important in my life. I have a greater appreciation for the value of my own life, and I can better appreciate each day. So these are all of those domains just kind of in a visual, helping you see each of them, right? Under personal strength, there's things like being more authentic, more confident, humility. Under new possibilities, there's things like openness to new ways of living and working. Under improved relationships, you see an increased sense of belonging, emotional vulnerability, stronger bonds with others, spiritual growth, having a deeper faith or a clear purpose, appreciation of life, having a sense of priorities, altruism, all things that we see in post-traumatic growth. So in terms of the study, like I said, it's very small, and we're actually still collecting narratives, but this is the analysis of those first 5 narratives. And so these were in-depth qualitative interviews with 5 people between 18 and 65 who participated specifically in 12-step recovery. And participants were in Central Texas region, pretty much Austin and San Antonio area, and Omaha, Nebraska. And they were invited to tell their stories. And so they had open-ended prompts, tell me your recovery story. And as you would expect people in recovery to do, they did, right? And so there are hours and hours of stories that really talk about people's journey and allowed us to look for these themes of post-traumatic growth. And so 2 investigators did multifaceted narrative coding to look at inner code agreement. And we had a high degree of agreement, which meant that we really agreed that these themes were things that we saw across these narratives. So in terms of post-traumatic growth inventory, we gave all of these participants 4 out of 5 because one of them chose not to do that. But we gave them the post-traumatic growth inventory because before we look for things of post-traumatic growth in your narrative, we want to know, is it even a fair assumption that you've experienced post-traumatic growth? Not everyone following an event does, right? And so these were all folks, and that would have been a great demographic characteristic for me to give you, that were in long-term recovery. So they had had a lot of recovery and had worked all of the 12 steps, which we'll talk about in terms of facilitating post-traumatic growth, why that might matter. And so on a 5-point scale, this gives you an idea of where they were in terms of each of those domains. And so in relating to others, their mean score was 4.78, meaning that they very highly resonated with a change there. 4.75 in new possibilities. 4.33 in personal strength, which was actually the lowest. And you'll see when we pull out some of the narratives, the least probably talked about, and I have some theory about why that might be in terms of these particular participants as well. 4.82 in spiritual and experiential change, and 4.91 in appreciation of life. So at least on the face of it, we have a good assumption that they've experienced a change. So this is some of the things that they had to say to us. These are the themes that we thought reflected these different domains. So in terms of relating to others, a participant told us, they knew I was in recovery, but had no idea what is available and how that shows up in our life. That certainly would not have happened prior to recovery as I have now. People caring about me, woven into the fabric of my life. That's recovery. I may not even like them, but guarantee one man named Brian, if I got a phone call from Houston, if he was in trouble, I'd be in my pickup and on my way. That's kind of how it is for us. We help one another out. It's easier to love them. I feel that's ephemeral. Real love is what you do whether you want or not. It's a verb, an action, a direction you step into. I may not want to help Brian and think it's good you're in trouble. Go to hell, but get in the truck and go. Right? So this idea that regardless of how I feel, I'm still going to relate to this person in a loving way. The second one here is when I had heart attacks and came out of a coma, the first thing I wanted was to be with the people from recovery. My family was astounded. These people are willing to be part of my life. So we see that change in how they're relating to others. In terms of new possibilities, the first time I came in, I got a copy. This person's talking about a book. I couldn't read it. I couldn't make sense of it. It was the first textbook I have ever studied. School and high school was a place to meet friends and do drugs. I should not have passed. I didn't know anything. The front of the book is written as a textbook. I had no idea what it was talking about. Now I know how to utilize a textbook. It has stories in the back for identification. What was their experience? Why was he drinking? What was the catalyst? What has life been since? I would identify. Theme 3 is personal strength. And as I said, this was a little bit lower, still high, but lower. And so some of the quotes here are the holidays, a goddamn another year. It is what it is. I accept it. I'm okay with it. I'm able to get through. I know I was always a fighter. As long as I'm doing the right thing and not doing the negative thing, things are going to work out. It might not work out how I want it to, but I always see down the road how it was in my best interest. Even if I didn't think it should be that way, later on, I see now why it has happened that way for this to happen. Part of it is just accepting I'm okay with not knowing why. I don't know why. I'm unable to stop even though I should, and the person next to me can, and I don't have to know why. I just need to know I can't, and I better get some help or it's going to get worse. Spiritual and existential change. I don't know what God is, but seems as though there's nothing that wants the best for me. There's something that wants the best for me. For you, that's open to all people. If you do certain things, you get certain results and tap into this power. As an alcoholic, I'm hopeless. I don't have a chance. I'm without a defense. But if I do these certain things, it's been found in 1935, the official start of AA, and all those years we have found you can align yourself with this power. If you are aligned with this power, you don't have to worry. It's just part of your life. You aren't going to. It's like a vaccination, immunity. You don't have to worry about it. So spirituality has to do with the gift of that. Spiritual experiences, and there's a difference between the two, spiritual awakening and spiritual experience. I had a huge thing happen to me after I was sober about 20 months. I had a dream. I was no longer going to work, and the woman I was seeing wasn't there. I fell off a scaffold and fell asleep. I had a huge spiritual awakening, a dream like a vision. I learned about dreams within the next year or so. I worked on that dream for 5 years to try and mine all the pieces hidden to me in this. The energy going through my body, the waves, was a kundalini experience. From my crown down through my body, it was clearly something strange, and I had no one to talk to about it. It was a huge spiritual experience. That one was an awakening. I didn't know what it was telling me. Like one of the Bible bashing guys talking about the scripture, I have had a spiritual awakening. It was not so much about not to drink, but about my relationship with whatever God is, and how I saw God, and what was going to happen in my life in the near future. It was a hell of a vision. It was very cool from this perspective, but from that perspective, it was awe. And then appreciation of life. Trouble is part of the show. It's a good thing. I don't have a wife. I don't have children. That's what I do have. It's enough to make up for the rest. It's a blessing to be able to enjoy the trees, the nature of things, and so forth. Have a gratitude list. Be grateful you have a yard to mow. Be grateful you have food in the cabinet. See the positive instead of the negative. There's a good life on this earth if you're willing to live it. Live it in a positive way and not be so negative about it. Changing from being angry about the past difficulties to being thankful that at least I got to be in recovery early. So some of the ways that you can work on supporting post-traumatic growth and recovery is to allow people opportunities to reflect on their experiences and emotions. Okay. So these particular participants were in 12-step recovery, which just happens to offer some of those opportunities. It's not necessarily the only way that someone can reflect on their experiences and emotions, but part of the steps is reflecting on their experience. Fostering a sense of community, which is something that's inherent in that program. Journaling, sharing, narratives matter, right? So part of meaning making means that I'm examining where I've been, where I am, and what got me there, right? Helping people to talk about their life before and after the trauma, and helping people to identify and talk about their core beliefs are all things that help people work through this process.